Chapter 20. Josephine held up her arms and quieted everyone down. Well done, Harlow, well done. You should be proud of yourself. That was a valiant effort. I declare Harlow the winner of round 1. The clapping started all over again, and I glanced at Ames, who somehow managed to crack a prideful smile that I was sure must have hurt him in front of all these people. Stride beamed and cheered the loudest. The other girls shifted uncomfortably and gnawed on their fingernails. After all, I had yet again sent home another wolf. Me, an outsider who didn't belong. How would they ever survive without their queen bitch Sloane? Speaking of, where did she go? I finally spotted her talking to Connolly, pointing and practically hissing at him. They both looked over at me at the same time, and the looks on their faces scared me. They were glaring like I was some insect they needed to squash. Someone touched my shoulder, and I just about jumped out of my skin. It was Annecy, carrying a large first aid kit. "What's wrong?" she asked, flicking her gaze to the arguing duo and then back to me again. "Come on, we have to get you stitched up. The next fight is starting." I turned from Connolly and Sloane and made my way out of the ring with Annecy. Jenny was going up against Ella next, and they both snarled wolfishly as I passed them. We sat on some benches set around the sides of the gym. "Annecy, did you see what I did?" I murmured. "Yes, you won the fight," she said casually. "But you didn't see what came out of me?" She blinked hard at me. "What?" "Nothing." So she hadn't seen the burst of white. Had I imagined it? A hallucination caused by too much stress, maybe? Annecy opened her kit and dug around the medical supplies. Professional supplies from the look of them, not something from a drugstore. I looked at her with new eyes. "You know how to stitch me up?" "Don't you worry. I'm fully trained. Shifters have everything they could ever need here. Because we can't trust the outside world with our little secret now, can we? We couldn't possibly go to a hospital to get x-rays or blood work or anything, really." I nodded slowly. It made sense. X-rays would show years of bone breakage and metamorphosis. Blood work might show they had animal blood or some chromosome that would give away who they really were. "So you guys have, medical teams that help you with stuff like this?" "Yes, we have many different shifters trained in various health areas to assist us if we ever require it." She pulled out a needle, poked the tip through the top of a bottle, and drained the liquid from it. "This will help with the pain." She put an elastic around my arm and tied it. Then she tapped her fingers along my arm for a vein. "What about rabies?" "Sloane's up to date on her shots. Not to worry." "Could have fooled me," I muttered. When she found a vein, she administered the pain medication, then took the needle out and disposed of it with the ease of someone who'd practiced this a lot. I even got a cute little wolf cub Band-Aid. She took the elastic off, put it back in the first aid kit, then closely examined my wound. Wow, she really went deep. That's surprising. Why is that surprising? Because the intention of the full moon games is not to injure or kill someone. They're not actually supposed to seriously hurt someone. I shook my head at the ceiling. Well, she does hate me. Hate's such a strong word, but she pinched her mouth shut while she disinfected my wound. I flinched since the pain medication hadn't fully kicked in, noting how she trailed off because she must have known I was right. She put needle to thread and started to stitch me up, one fang mark at a time. "You might have scars." "I just want to make it out of here alive," I told her. "Scars are the least of my worries." When she was finished, she bandaged the whole arm with gauze so it wouldn't get dirty or infected. Back in the ring, Jenny had just defeated Ella. Jenny shifted back into a human, jumping up and throwing her hands into the air. Ella, still in her wolf form, slumped in defeat. Then the last fight of the day was almost over before it began. Olivia was the victor. Maria would have one banger of a headache after that mega hit to her skull. "We have 3 winners today," Josephine announced from the center of the ring. "Harlow, Jenny, and Olivia. Congratulations, ladies. You've much to be proud of. We are all going to head back for an evening of celebration. But first, take the afternoon to recoup your energy. You're going to need it." I groaned inwardly. What the hell did that mean? Later, back in my room, I flopped down on the bed, so completely done with today, this week, this year. This is a good time as any to start adding vodka to all my meals. Annecy chuckled while she flitted around my room, her maid's outfit rustling as she did so. "How about some green tea and a sandwich tray instead? Go take a shower and try to keep your arm as dry as possible." Begrudgingly, I dragged myself to the bathroom, stepped into the shower, and let the hot water cascade all over me. It felt good to wash off the blood, dirt, and dog hair from the day. When I returned to my bedroom wrapped in a towel, Annecy was there, laying out my dress for the evening. It was a long, deep purple gown that would go well with my purple hair. A steaming teapot sat atop my dresser, and she immediately went to it to pour me a mug. I sat on my bed, propping myself up with pillows. The hot water had helped soothe some of my aching muscles, but certainly not all of my pains. What's going on between Sloane and Connolly? It seemed silly to dance around the subject, so I didn't. Annecy handed me my mug of green tea and sat down on the bed with hers, soothing her already pristine-looking bun. "What do you mean?" I explained how Sloane had left the ring after our fight and gone straight to Connolly, how they'd argued in front of everyone, the hissing and snapping between the two of them, and the fact that they both glared at me, hatred spilling from their eyes. "Maybe something's going on between them," I said, cupping my hands around my tea. "There's no way she was just pissed because she lost the fight and is going home. There was more to it than that." "You think they're involved?" "Well, not sexually, if that's what you mean, but involved in murders and disappearances? Then maybe." She didn't look convinced. Or she was just angry that she lost. "No, you didn't see the way Connolly looked at me after I defeated Sloane," I insisted. "It's like I shat in his Cheerios or something. And Sloane was trying to kill me in the arena. Maybe that's what Connolly wanted her to do." A deeply troubled frown marred Annecy's pretty face. "I have no idea, Harlow. I hope not, because they're part of my pack. Turning on each other is a terrible thing. And yet some of your pack have died," I reminded her gently. She stared down at her tea like she wanted to drown in it, the mug trembling slightly. "You're about to ask for my help again, aren't you?" I blew out a heavy breath. "I'm sorry, Annecy, but yeah, probably. It's only because I have no pack to count on. It's just me here." She downed the rest of her tea, refilled both of our mugs, and then lifted her chin resolutely. "And me. You have me." "Thank you." I bumped her shoulder with mine, so grateful that she was on my side. Grateful she was a friend. Thanks for patching me up, too. She offered a faint smile over the rim of her mug. "Let's not make a habit of it, shall we?" "Fair enough," I agreed and clinked her mug with mine. So now there were 3 contestants. One more day left. But first, another shitty celebration. Chapter 21. Win the full moon games and marry a wolf shifter I didn't love. or die. That pretty much summed everything up. When I entered the crowded ballroom for the celebration, I didn't get as many dirty looks from the other two girls over at the contestants' table as I did when Sloane was here to fuel that ugly fire. Although, what would they do if I actually won the full moon games? How dare a human marry into a wolf family and all that, right? My skin crawled at the sight of Connolly over by the bar talking to Stride. I turned away from them immediately, hoping neither had seen me. It made me uncomfortable every time Connolly was nearby. But Stride would be deciding on who his mate was tomorrow, and then it would be all over, one way or another. Time to go hold up a wall or something. I'd found a good one across the ballroom, away from the band playing light classical music, with a dark, narrow hallway leading beyond it in case I needed a quick escape. Or at least escape as much as I could. When I sagged against the wall, a velvety, smooth, rich voice came from just around the corner in the hall. "You look beautiful tonight, Harlow." Ames. Nice guy with a simple smile or detached douche waffle Ames. Hot and cold Ames, who was only hot when no one was around while he lurked in dark hallways. Still, his voice curled around me like smoke and teased phantom fingers over my skin, making me shiver. "Thank you," I said, not bothering to care if it looked like I was talking to myself. "I imagine you do too." "You did well against Sloane." Surprised. A pause, then, "I really shouldn't be." "No, you shouldn't," I agreed. We both went quiet, even though I wanted to ask him about Stride and Connolly, about the white light that had shot out of me during the fight that no one else saw, about what would happen if I won, and about what would happen if I didn't. But mostly, I didn't know how to put into words how I felt, like something that could be great was slipping through my fingers, something great with him, but there was nothing I could do about it. "How's the wound?" he said after a moment. "We're really going to talk about the fight?" Sighing heavily, he reached around the corner to hook his pinky through mine, shooting off powerful sparks up and down my skin. "I want what's best for you, Harlow. You believe that, right?" I leaned back against the wall and massaged his pinky with my own, hating how far away he seemed, yet content that he was here with me now. "I wish you could talk to me like this all the time. Honestly, without your cold, dead mask." "You shouldn't want to talk to me, period." He grazed the rest of my fingers with his, the gentlest of touches that made me glow from the inside out. "You should be angry with me. And yet I'm not. Why? Because you want me alive? You care? But if I were you, I would never forgive me." He huffed a disgusted growl. "I would stay as far away as possible from me for putting you in this situation." I squeezed his hand in mine. "And yet I'm not. You didn't choose the start date for the full moon games. You're not the one who called my name to participate. You can't torture yourself for something you had no control over." "I'll always torture myself for it. I just couldn't stay away from you. I wanted you right from the start, Harlow. It's stupid and selfish and shitty." He spoke low and raspy, seeming to almost choke on his guilt. But that's the truth of it. His words caressed over my skin like silk. He wanted me. Me, a lost, bruised-up human with a penchant for used paperbacks who was barely able to avoid flunking out of college and who didn't belong here. Me. How did I get so lucky? "What if I forgive you?" I asked softly. "I'm not sure it matters anymore. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and I don't know who had a hand in Kat and Every's disappearances. Neither do Stride or Connolly. But what I do know is this. I will do everything I can to keep you safe and unharmed." He tightened his grip on my hand and shook it a little. "Do you hear me? That's all that matters." The raw confidence in his voice brought tears to my eyes that I meant so much to him. Despite this shitty situation, I felt lucky he was by my side. Hidden in shadows, but still, it counted. "Yeah, I hear you." But that wasn't all that mattered. Something else was happening here. With me. With the white streak of light that had come from inside me. And I had no idea what it was. From across the ballroom, someone unleashed a blood-curdling scream. I jumped, my lungs locking together, and turned to see Olivia launching herself at Stride with a large blade in her hand, her face contorted in rage. All Stride had time to do was put his hand out as if to stop her before Olivia pounced on him and slammed him to the ground. She held the dagger over her head as if to strike when Stride knocked her off of him. Ames was across the room in a split second and pulling Olivia from the alpha. She was writhing and screaming in Ames's arms, the dagger now fallen to the floor. Stunned, I could only stare, not recognizing her at all. I had never seen her like this before. She looked like she was possessed by a demon or something. She had tried to kill Stride, but why? She was still in the running to become his bride. Or had been. Not anymore, probably. Ames, Ferdinand, and Connolly dragged the girl kicking and shouting from the room. As soon as she was gone, I hurried toward Stride. He hauled himself up from the ground, visibly shaken and dusting himself off. He looked shell-shocked. "Are you okay?" I asked, looking him over. "Yeah, I guess. I don't really understand what just happened." I shook my head. "It doesn't really make any sense." Stride bent to pick up the dagger, looking at it curiously. Connolly walked back into the ballroom and approached us. My blood crystallized in my veins the closer he drew, and I found myself cringing backward, but I rooted my feet to the floor to stay put. He ignored me in favor of studying Stride. "Are you okay?" "Fine," he said, running his hands through his blonde hair. "What happened to Olivia?" "We're escorting her out of here. She'll be thoroughly interrogated until we get to the bottom of things." I narrowed my eyes at Connolly. That sure seemed like a convenient excuse, one delivered a little too smoothly. Stride nodded down at the dagger in his hands. "Well, I guess it's just two girls now." "Nonsense. We will go on as we intended. We brought another girl in." Stride snapped his slightly glassy eyes up to meet Connolly's. "What? Already?" "Oh, we always have a plan B, just in case." He turned just as Sloane breezed into the room with a light blue poofy princess dress and a victorious smile on her face. "You have got to be kidding me," I growled. Connolly turned to me wearing an oil slick of a smile. "Come now, Harlow. Surely you don't mind a little competition." Sloane flounced up to us, positively beaming, and it was all I could do to keep from baring my teeth. "Competition," I spat. Clearly she wasn't, since I handed her ass to her in the arena, and she was sent home. But I guess if she needs your help to win, more power to her. Stride studied me closely for a second, his gaze pitted between me and the approaching princess. "So you happened to be standing outside just in case someone tried to kill me?" Stride asked her, his face a storm of seething emotions. "That seems awfully convenient, Sloane." I stalked away from all of them, seething myself. Where had Sloane been this whole time? Because she obviously never went home in the first place. She had been lying in wait like a snake in tall grass for her opportunity, and Olivia just handed it over. Olivia had sacrificed herself to allow Sloane back in. So I guess the last rule of the full moon games was that there were no rules. Good to know. Playing with zero rules was my favorite. Chapter 22. Friday, the full wolf moon. I was in no way prepared for the final challenge. The family lunch, one contestant at a time. More terrifying than the entire full moon games competition. The last stop before Stride made his final decision. The very idea made me want to vomit. When I was fully dressed, I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. Unsurprised, I didn't recognize my reflection. Annecy had pinned up my hair in loose curls and smoked out my eyes. My boobs practically spilled out of my silvery purple dress, which complemented my long legs with its thigh-high slits, as well as my purple hair. I looked fucking fierce. Unless that was the champagne blurring my vision. Either way, I didn't care. I just wanted to get lunch over with and survive. Are you ready? Annecy asked, smoothing and tucking my dress that she'd already smoothed and tucked. As ready as I'll ever be. Then let's go. I followed her out of the bedroom and headed into the hallway. Harlow, she murmured, whatever happens tonight, please know that I've really enjoyed getting to know you. Her words stopped me in my tracks. What the hell does that mean? Are you telling me goodbye? I don't know. She wrung her hands together and shook her head hard before throwing her arms around me. I just genuinely like you. Her voice cracked, which split an aching fissure down my heart. I genuinely like you too, I whispered. You're like a sister to me. Annecy had no other agenda aside from being here for me. Her support, devotion, and kindness meant the world to me, and I wasn't sure I could ever repay her for that. She pulled away, whisked tears from her face, and took me by the shoulders, her pretty green eyes bright. Please remember that I will have your back, no matter what. Okay, now she was starting to scare me. I opened my mouth to say so when she interrupted me. And apparently I'm not the only one who has your back. Her gaze shifted behind me in surprise. I turned. Cue the slow-mo in a sexy theme song because here came Ames, dressed in a tux. Holy God. The form-fitting tux hinted at the powerful build underneath. Pair that with his meticulously mussed-up hair, broody good looks, pouty lips, and his come-hither eyes that promised nothing but heat and sin. I was a goner. R.I.P. to my panties again around this man. My inner thighs were drenched. Pretty sure I could get pregnant at just the sight of him. He stopped a polite distance away, but the look in his eyes was anything but as he raked them down my dress, lingered on every single curve, and devoured me with one sweep of those dark lashes. The heat of his gaze pulsed a vicious ache between my legs, one I knew only he could satisfy. Too bad the rest of the world wouldn't stop for wild sex with him, even just this one time. Harlow, he said, too low for anyone else's ears. You're stunning as always. His voice wrapped me in dark velvet and tiptoed all sorts of illicit promises up my arms, over my shoulders, and into my ears. I simply nodded. The sight of him had paralyzed my tongue. I'm here to take you to lunch. I glanced at Annecy, who nodded. Sure. Yeah. I entwined my arm in his, and he floated me the rest of the way toward the grand staircase. Floated me because my body hummed being so close to him. I resisted the urge to shove him into a dark corner and lick every inch of him, but just barely. An image of us walking to lunch as a couple, him and me holding hands, flitted through my mind. I immediately killed that thought. There was no point in even thinking like that. The rest of the day held my fate in fragile hands, and unfortunately, those hands didn't belong to either of us. Down on the first floor, he walked me to the dining area, where a large table spread almost the length of the entire room. Crystal and silver glinted in the soft glow from 3 large candelabras carved with snarling wolves. At the sight of us, everyone seated instantly hushed and set me under a microscope once again. I swallowed hard as we approached, feeling out of place and self-conscious underneath everyone's weighty stares. Ames brought me to Stride at the head of the table, where he seated me on Stride's right side. Connolly sat across from me, next to his wife, Jessa, who blinked at her reflection in the back of her spoon. Most of the others at the table I didn't recognize. "You look lovely, Harlow," Stride offered, and I thanked him with only a wobbly smile as I settled into my seat. Ames strode around to the other side of the table and sat beside Jessa. Conversations resumed, none of them involving me, yet. Thank God. Wine was served, and I practically drowned myself inside my glass to keep my gaze from drifting across the table at Ames. Then the subject of the wolf killings came up, specifically Kat's family. I perked up and made the mistake of looking at Connolly, who was already looking at me. The man next to me, who I didn't know, tisked. Such a tragedy. Who would do such a thing? The woman next to him asked as she waved her empty wine glass at a waiter. Have none of you considered that the killings could be an inside job? I asked, no one in particular. From within this pack? Murmurs rippled around the table. Connolly waved me off, as if I hadn't spoken at all before raising his voice to be heard over the chatter. Personally, I think we all need to accept the fact that our pack, this one right here, is superior. What happened to the rest doesn't affect us. I blinked at him. Did he just decide mass murdering of his own species didn't matter? Stride leaned forward in his seat, opening and closing his mouth. Ames shifted uncomfortably when his mom threw down her spoon with a loud clatter. "Oh, the devil is with them," Jessa slurred. "But punishment is coming." My eyes widened. It was the first time I had heard her speak. Connolly frowned his displeasure. "Quiet, Jessa. We don't need that right now." "My husband was murdered," she hissed. "I'm your husband." His voice went arctic, sending a shiver across my bare shoulders. She gazed into her empty wine glass miserably. "I'm going to have to disagree with you, Dad. What Aunt Jessa said is right." I gaped at Stride. I had never seen him stand up to Connolly before. Maybe the fact that he wanted to avenge his own uncle's death was enough for him to stand up to Connolly. "What did you say to me?" Connolly barked. "I don't think we should ignore the killings or assume the ones left alive are superior to the rest. Uncle Darian was murdered, and he wasn't inferior in any way. He was our alpha. You know that." "I didn't mean to say that he was inferior," Connolly amended. "But talking of vengeance is foolish. It's a great way to get yourself killed." "I think you're right," I said to Stride. "Someone should definitely be working to find out who is behind the disappearances and killings. Otherwise, wolves are going to keep coming up missing or dead." "Exactly," Stride agreed. I fought the urge to look at Ames. I turned my attention to Jessa instead, and found her staring at me like she'd only set eyes on me that very moment. like she just realized I was here for the first time since the full moon games had started. Tears welled up in her eyes, and I swallowed thickly as my eyes began to sting by default. She was married to another man, while still obviously grieving the loss of her husband, the former pack alpha. It was sickening. Did she have a choice in the matter? Or was it just one of those things she had to do? Was she forced to marry Connolly, be controlled, unable to make any decisions for herself? It would certainly explain her behavior. I felt for her, saw a little bit of my potential future in her if I was forced to marry Stride. That was the very last thing I wanted. Nonsense. This conversation is over. Let's move on to matters that are more important, Connolly said, glaring at me. We're here to get to know Harlow better, after all. I didn't even bother forcing a smile at that. Tonight is the big night, Stride said proudly. So it was. Who was he going to choose? Between Jess's outburst, Connolly's constant glowering and cold demeanor, and sitting around a bunch of people I'd never met, the family lunch was the fifth circle of hell. I doubted anyone here really wanted to get to know me better. It was a formal affair fit for a queen, and a means to see if I was worthy to be part of their family. And I wasn't. They had clearly known nothing but wealth and opulence their entire lives, while I'd lived with a single mother who tried her best. Plus, there was a lot going on in this shifter family that I knew nothing about. I didn't belong here. I was a proverbial fish out of water, and everyone could clearly see it. I had fully expected Connolly to grill me all through lunch about myself, but he didn't ask me anything, which made me even more suspicious. He probably didn't care because he knew I would be removed from the full moon games one way or another. Stride stood up from the table. He moved behind my chair and extended a hand. I looked up at him. Where are we going? I'm going to escort you to your room. All right then. Lunch was over. I wasn't exactly sorry to go. I risked a glance at Ames, who was once again expressionless in the room full of people. Harlow? Stride prompted. Sliding my hand into his, I got up from the table and walked away from the guests. Once we were in the hall, I could breathe again. I think that went very well, he said. My family seemed to enjoy your company. I stifled a sigh. I think you mean tolerate, not enjoy. Easy to get those two words mixed up, though. He laughed, an almost pleasant sound. It's so refreshing being around you. You're not always trying to impress me or giggling at every mindless thing I say. You're just you. It's hard to be anyone else, especially the potential bride of a wolf shifter, when I'm not one myself, but, semantics. Potato. He nodded as we took to the stairs up to my room. I see your point. You do? Well, yeah, you don't bend to anyone's will. Right. Actually, wrong. My whole being here was bending me against my will. We stopped outside the door of my room. Anyway, be seeing you. I turned to go in. He chuckled like I'd just made another joke and pressed his palm to the door before I could open it. You're not going to invite me in? I couldn't even imagine him in my room alone with me. No thanks. Period. But he was pushing into me now, his gaze on my lips, his weight crushing me against the door. I can smell the arousal on you. Stride, get off me. I shoved at him, but he wasn't budging. Move. He turned the knob of my door and swung it open, pushing me inside, just like I smelled it the night of the moon run. Icicles needled through my veins. He knew. He fucking knew about Ames and me. I backed away farther into my room, my nerves shriveling. Get out, Stride. No one says no to me. He shook his head and started to close the door behind him, his shuttered eyes fevered with lust. You are to obey the alpha. Panic crystallized inside my lungs. I could read his intentions loud and clear, and all of them racked me with a deep tremble. The steak knife. I had to get to it, but it was in the bedside table all the way on the other side of the room. I'd never make it in time. Hey, Stride, a voice called from out in the hallway. Ames. It was Ames. Relief funneled through me so hard that my knees wobbled. His mouth in a firm line, Stride peered around the not quite closed door. Connolly wants to see you. Ames stopped outside my door, and when he saw me frozen to the floor, his icy blue eyes locked onto Stride. What the hell are you doing here? Stride snorted. What, an alpha can't go anywhere he wants to in his own house? He patted Ames's chest on his way out. Oh, I guess you wouldn't know, would you? Ames glared after him, as though to make sure he was really gone, and then slipped into my room and locked the door behind him. Did he touch you? He demanded with a harsh growl. Shaking my head, I threw myself into his arms. But if you hadn't shown up when you did, he might have. That fucking bastard. He held me to him tightly, even as he shook with rage. Are you all right? I am now, I whispered, clinging to him, breathing him in. I couldn't think about what could have happened or what might happen later tonight, especially if I won and had to marry that fucker. No, I wanted to keep existing in this moment right here with a man who could kindle flames with one touch, one breath, one look. Our bodies charged together everywhere we were connected and engulfed me with fiery need. His jaw rubbed against my cheek as he nuzzled my hairline, and I sank my eyes closed at all of the sensations rippling through me. Ames, I moaned, pulling back to meet his molten stare. Time seemed to slow as our breaths mingled and our souls united, pulling us closer and closer still. Wild currents sparked all over my skin at his nearness, at the way his mouth parted when his gaze dipped down to my lips. My frantic pulse hummed to every corner of the room. He leaned down and swept his lips across mine, hard and fast, powerful enough to snap my inner sexual beast right the fuck awake. Chapter 23. I kissed Ames back, devouring his mouth with mine, and held to his wide shoulders while I wrapped my legs around his hips. Thank God for the thigh-high slits in my dress so I could do that with ease. I couldn't have controlled myself even if I wanted to. My body was just reacting as he consumed my senses with his smell and taste and feel, a magic potion that summoned my hips to grind against him. With a heady growl at the back of his throat that vibrated between my thighs, he cupped my ass and rocked me against his straining cock. Fuck Harlow. I want you, Ames. I always have. I ran my hands through his dark hair and moaned as the strands slipped between my fingers like silk. He shoved me against the wall by the door so hard that the art frames on the walls rattled. I barely noticed. All I needed was him inside of me. God, I breathed when the last spasm faded from my body. Fuck, Harlow. I think you broke me. He braced himself over me and dipped his head to kiss me, his shoulders heaving. I pressed my smile against his lips. I'm sorry. I think I'll live. His grin hurt my heart with how beautiful it was. Our heavy breaths mingled between us while we gazed at each other, lost in one another, but also found at the same time. I couldn't explain it, but with him, a deeper part of me felt full when I hadn't even realized it had been empty. Not just full, but alive and bubbling with a sense of rightness, a vivid and rare and flawless part of my soul that made me feel complete. I cupped his face and kissed him again and again, taking my fill of him, and he gave it to me, soft and gentle, hard and demanding. "Harlow," he said, his lips brushing mine. The heat in his eyes kindled a renewed, pulsing ache between my legs as he seemed to gaze into my mind. "I think we might be fated mates." "No, not might be." He sucked in a breath. "We are. I feel it. This constant pressure inside my chest that calls me to you. And it's like nothing I've ever felt before." Hadn't that been exactly what I'd been thinking? That he was my missing piece, my perfect match, that had been sewn into the fabric of time and space because it was meant to be? "I feel it too, Ames," I whispered. "You're mine, and I'm yours." Somehow, even though I was human. Smiling, he touched his forehead to mine. "I knew it the moment I saw you go into that bookstore. This feeling that I wasn't in control of, that I wanted more of." He trailed his fingers down my cheek, leaving a wake of powerful tingles. "It's you." Tears welled up in my eyes. How cruel of fate to put us together when I might be forced to marry another, though. What a shitty thing to do. "Don't say that." He touched his lips to the tip of my nose and gently wiped away my tears. "We'll find a way to be together, after we know who's been chosen." But what if Stride chose me? What if he didn't, and I was up next on the murder list, whether just because, or so wolf shifters could keep their secret from the humans? No matter how this turned out, none of it would be good. None of it would end with me and Ames together, as we should be, as we were fated to be. A rustle sounded outside the door, then the click of a lock, and Annecy burst inside. She gasped when she saw us in bed together. "What the hell is going on here?"